Today's headlines: Tigray's armed forces take hold of Ethiopia's Western Command and multiple divisions of Southern Commands, located in Gimba, Magdala University, Guguwat, and Tabasiga. Good evening, I'm Salam Berhana with your news for the evening. And now for the details. Tigray's armed forces take hold of Ethiopia's Western Command and multiple divisions of its Southern Command, located in Gimba, Magdala University, Guguwat, and Tabasika. They also launched an additional attack on an Amara Special Police Force unit and Amara militia moving west of Wagaltena. Tigray's armed forces launched their successful attack on November 5, 2021, taking hold of countless weaponries. Yesterday, in an event held in Washington, D.C., members of 9 Ethiopian political parties, including Tigray's People Liberation Front, the ruling party in Tigray, Oromo Liberation Front, and 7 other political parties formed the United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces. The parties say the coalition was formed to coordinate efforts against Abiy Ahmed's regime and to serve as a starting point for an all-inclusive national dialogue. Abel Tsagabu has more on this.
9 political parties has established the United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces, that alliance made up of Tigray People's Liberation Front, Oromo Liberation Front, Sidama National Liberation Front, Somali State Resistance, Alpha Revolutionary Democratic Unity Front, Qimant Democratic Party, Gambela People's Liberation Army, Benshangul People's Liberation Army, and Ago Democratic Movement signed the agreement on November 5. Representatives say they are joining hands in an effort to ensure that the multinational arrangement is secured in the transitional process after it has early been undermined by Abiy Ahmed's rule.
We are witnessing an unstable Ethiopia on the verge of collapse with apparent negative consequences not only to itself but also with the serious security implications to the region, to the larger East Africa, Red Sea, and the entire continent and beyond. Ethiopia is a country of over 115 million. If allowed to fail, it shall be of grave concern to all our partners, potentially triggering alarm over the country's current trajectory. In addition to this, following the regime's heavy defeat, sustaining in all battlefront, its administrative structures, both at the federal and regional levels, are evidently crumbling. As a response to the myriad of crises facing the various nations of the country and to reverse the harmful effects of Abiy Ahmed's autocratic rule to our peoples and beyond, we have recognized the urgent need to collaborate and join our forces towards a safe transition in the country. Hence, have established the United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces. The United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces is aligned our collective will towards unified struggle for democracy, equality, and self-determination that benefits us all mutually.
Members of the newly established front say that they don't recognize Abiy Ahmed's government as the electoral process had failed to be inclusive and said it rejected any attempts to revise the Ethiopian constitution through the government formed by Abiy Ahmed.
We reiterate our position that we do not recognize the illegally constituted government by the self-acclaimed Prosperity Party based on sham election to which the main opposition parties in Ethiopia were denied participation. Equally, the United Front of Ethiopian Federalist and Confederalist Forces categorically reject and shall consider it null any attempt to temper the existing constitution in any form or shape. Therefore, we call upon all the Federalist and Confederalist forces in Ethiopia to join the front, whose core goal is clearly stated and benefits the entire nations and peoples in Ethiopia.
Tigrayan Representative Berhane ገብረክርስቶስ said the current civil war has overwhelmed the state to a point that it may collapse, saying that all forces are committed to overthrowing this genocidal regime.
We all are forced to defend ourselves. There is genocide taking place, and we are trying to relieve our peoples and ourselves from genocide. This is what's taking place today. So definitely peoples in Ethiopia are resisting. People in Ethiopia are in self-defense. This will continue until the regime accepts a peaceful path. We in the United Front and others are trying to have a change in Ethiopia so that Ethiopia could stabilize and the region could stabilize. We're forced to defend ourselves and will continue until that day.
The Tigray People's Liberation Front and Oromo Liberation Front had reached an agreement to coordinate their military and political efforts in August 2021.
We had a brief stay with Getacho Reda, a high-ranking member of Tigray People's Liberation Front, on this new alliance. Here's what he had to say. We're joined today by Getacho Reda, Executive Committee member of TPLF. Thank you, Getacho, for joining us.
You're welcome.
So Tigray's People Liberation Front and Oromo Liberation and 7 other parties signed an agreement yesterday to form an alliance of federal and confederal forces. What is the aim of this new coalition?
Well, the aim is to bring all the forces together who have a vested interest in seeing a stable and peaceful transition in Ethiopia in a post-Abiy administration. And it's also aimed at or coordinating our efforts at holding some kind of inclusive national dialogue that would prepare grounds for a new political dispensation in Ethiopia that could deal with the fallouts of the fascistic regime and its efforts to wreak havoc in the country. These are organizations that really think they have to bring their resources together, they have to bring their efforts together to make sure that the genocidal campaign that the regime has unleashed comes to an end and quickly. We don't have a common political program. We don't have a common ideology or anything other than the fact that we have the best interest of our people at heart. That's pretty much our aim.
Okay. Is there room for other like-minded parties to join the coalition?
Yes, this is just a start. We know that political parties throughout Ethiopia who represent not just only national groups, Somalis, Tigrayans, Oromos, Amharas, or whatever, but also parties who have the best interest of the people of Ethiopia at large. People who are interested in people, the safety, security of people, are welcome to join. So the most common denominator for all organizations to come to the fold is to be concerned about the people of Ethiopia, not the very barren and hollow concept of Ethiopia that Abiy and his comrades have now perfected it into a very boring art form. So what we are trying to do is to make sure that people who are really concerned about people, political parties who are really concerned about their people, come together and work out a working path towards a better future. We don't necessarily have to stick together. but at least we have to make sure that there is a new political dispensation in Ethiopia that takes into account the interest of our peoples. So the people of Tigray, for example, are interested in making sure that their aspirations are met. We have been fighting to the nail to ensure that our right to self-determination, our right to self-government, our right to freedom and all that is protected, and we have achieved significant results so far, and we'll definitely make sure to join hands with other like-minded people so that the very people who have put the life of our people at risk, the very people who have unleashed genocide and a campaign of terror on our people are held to account. And we know for a fact there are a number of political organizations, a number of national groups who are interested in making sure that such an outcome, to make sure that such an outcome is a reality, and we are joining hands with people. So anyone, any organization who has the best interest of Ethiopia, not just Ethiopia, but also the people of Ethiopia, are welcome to join us. Of course, it's only a beginning. It's not a forum where we intend to parcel out power amongst ourselves. This is a forum where people who care about their people come together and decide on how to deal with the problems of their people together. And to the extent that there are people who are worried about that there are people who really worry about people in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian people, they can come together and join us.
Was the alliance formed in anticipation of a dramatic change in the political atmosphere? In other words, what can be expected in the next few weeks of this conflict?
Well, look, I can address this question either of two ways. For one thing, the fact that we've been fighting a very determined fight against tyrants, against genociders, simply means that we have to bring about a quick end to the predicament that Ethiopia finds itself in. As far as my organization, TPLF, and its government go, we've been fighting this war for well over a year now. I mean, at least as far as the fighting goes. Although we've been under some kind of blockade or another for the last 3 years, at least the past year, it has been an openly declared genocidal campaign against the people of Tigray. So we've been fighting to the nail to reverse fortunes. We still have a long way to go before we could liberate every square inch of Tigray territory. Yes, still people in the western part of Tigray are still under occupation by Amhara expansionist forces, to a certain extent by also Eritrean forces. These are realities we have to work towards changing, and we'll change those facts on the ground, definitely. And the people of Tigray have been under siege, under blockade by Abiy Ahmed, who failed to ensure the submission of the people of Tigray through the use of weapons. He's been trying to achieve that through hunger and starvation imposed on our people. Children are dying. So we have been waging a very heroic struggle to put an end to such a campaign, and we've been wildly successful as far as that campaign is concerned. That part of our struggle is concerned. So we have had an alliance with the Oromo Liberation Army, OLF, OLA, OLF, and as of late we've been coordinating our efforts and even coordinating our military campaigns in many parts of the country. And we expect these campaigns to bear fruit very soon. So we expect our campaign to result in success, and we're pretty confident in that. But there are also organizations who have been involved in similar ventures, similar exercises. So the fact that we are joining hands is as much in anticipation of something around the corner, as much as it is in anticipation of the need for our organized efforts to bring about that change itself. So it's not just about expectation of that change that brought us together, but also the fact that we need to bring about that change that brought us together. That's pretty much why we are joining hands.
So what's the difference with the alliance formed now and the EPRDF coalition formed in 1991?
Well, the EPRDF coalition was a coalition from the get-go. It was a coalition of people who had similar ideological backgrounds, people who had some sort of organizational unity in the sense that they held Congress, they elected their representatives and all that. We don't have that kind of arrangement now. What brings those organizations together is the fact that they are all opposed to the kind of tyrannical regime that Abiy Ahmed has imposed on the people of Ethiopia. They care about their people. The Somalis care about their people. The Oromos care about their people. There are also other Oromo organizations and Somali organizations who care about their people. So this is not a popularity contest among those who consider themselves true representatives of the people of Somalia, the people of Somali people or Tigrayan people or whatever. This is an organization whereby people who at the very minimum consider Abiy Ahmed's tyrannical regime as inimical to the very existence of the Ethiopian people as a common denominator. Okay. In the case of EPRDF, it was a question of bringing together people who not just had a common enemy but also common ideology. So we're not worried about ideology at this point in time. Ideological issues as organizing principles can take center stage once we have dealt with this regime, which is now threatening the very existence of the Ethiopian state. Okay, once we deal with the tyrannical regime, I think these organizations would also come together to chart a new path towards an all-inclusive national dialogue. I'm not saying this has been worked out. What we are trying to do is there is a clear understanding on the part of these organizations that they need to harmonize their efforts towards bringing about a change in Ethiopia. Once that change occurs, there needs to be some kind of transition. That transition can only be successfully engineered as long as there is an inclusive sort of national dialogue. But we'll cross the bridge when it comes to it.
On Wednesday, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, a state-appointed body, and the United Nations released the findings of their joint investigation on atrocities committed in Tigray. The government of Tigray, as well as Tigrayan activists across the world, have opposed the joint investigation from the outset, stating concerns about the partiality of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. Winta Kidana has more.
On Wednesday, the UN and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, a state-appointed body, released a joint investigation on the gross violation of human rights in Tigray. The 156-page report says investigation took place between May 16 and August 31, 2021, where investigators had access to Tigray for just 1 month of the 3-month-long investigation, leading to one of the clearest shortcomings of the investigation, which is that it covered just 9 towns and cities in Tigray. These cities are Mekelle, Woro, Samra and nearby areas, Alamata, Bora, Maicho, Dansha, Maikadra, and Humera, which is where just 0.77% of victims of recorded atrocities are found in Tigray, according to the map made by Ghent University. All cities at the time were under hostile control by Ethiopian forces, especially Humera, Maikadra, and Dansha still under the hostile control of Amhara militia that have committed ethnic cleansing, removing almost all the Tigrayan population and resettling a new community, removing almost all indicators of what really happened there. According to the report, even the places where the investigators were able to travel, interviewees declined to be interviewed because of the presence of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission personnel.
Well, I believe that the atrocities, the alleged atrocities in Tigray have attained an international issue, an international status, because it is believed that at least Eritrean government has been involved in the atrocities. So in such circumstances, and when one of the alleged perpetrators of the atrocities are the government, there is a high probability that the government might try to escape accountability by making an investigation which is not really genuine investigation. So this is one of the traits of the impartiality of the investigation. In fact, because of this, the finding of the research itself has shown that when in the course of the investigation, a number of potential respondents were not willing to respond to the investigators. This has been provided in the investigation report itself. In addition to that, when the atrocities attain a kind of international status, it is more credible if it is investigated by commissions, bodies who are expected to investigate an international kind of disputes like the UN itself, or the UN can commission a kind of commission, an independent body. So in relation to this, I was in fact also wondering why the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, the Ethiopian government, was insisting in engaging the Human Rights Commission in the investigation. It might show that there is a hidden purpose of hiding certain serious crimes committed in the course of the war or the conflict. So it has seriously affected the credibility, the acceptability of the investigation report, not only internal by TPLF, by the government of Tigray, by activists, by civil society organizations. By the way, around 23 civil society organizations of Tigray have submitted their written concern about this issue to the UN before the initiation of the investigation. So it has severely affected its acceptability, credibility, not only at national level but also at international level. You can see the international media which shows that the report is not credible. We can mention a number of concerns. I have some issues on the methodologically. One of the issues of methodology of this investigation is actually the inclusion of Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, because it has resulted in perception bias against Human Rights Commission in some parts of Tigray, where some potential interviews, according to the investigation itself, declined to be interviewed. In addition to that, a number of important key informants have objected this investigation. You can take TPLF has objected, for example, and it could have been one of the important key informants. Not only TPLF, as I have previously mentioned, 23 COSOs in Tigray have expressly submitted a written objection for the engagement of Ethiopian Human Rights Commission in this. In addition to that, by the way, in the investigation, they have been using male investigators while they were interviewing survivors of sexual violence, female survivors of sexual violence, as you can see from the document itself. This is not appropriate. In addition to that, some victims have expressed not to hold an interview in the presence of any man, according to the research itself. In addition to that, you can see the harassment and intimidation of the joint investigating team members by the security force, if they were being intimidated, we can see the pressure that can be exerted on the respondents. I can tell you some particular information that I have about this. For example, in the survivors of sexual violence in one-stop center, they were being intimidated by the police force in Mekelle. The some of the police men in Mekelle were being sent to one-stop center to intimidate them, not to tell the reality to the investigating team. This I know it. In addition to that, I don't know if this is related with the investigation process or not. However, certain survivors of sexual violence were in the safe house in Mekelle. The safe house in Mekelle is expected to be confidential. No one should know the whereabouts of the safe house. However, the survivors of the safe house were also being intimidated by soldiers. The thing is, most of them are raped by soldiers, and when they are also intimidated by soldiers, you can see how the pressure was at the time of the investigation. By the way, I expect that United Nations has information about this, because when soldiers broke into the safe house, this has been communicated to UNFPA so that the UNFPA can assist in the relocation of the survivors of sexual violence. This has been also communicated to the United States, to the Embassy of the United States, so that maybe if a certain amount of fund can be obtained to relocate them. This has been also communicated to the European Union delegation to Ethiopia. So, in the presence of such pressures, such intimidations, it is not expected that the investigating team will have real information from the respondents.
Like I said, comforted at least by the fact that the civilian casualty that was feared to unfold did not really rose to the level that it was originally feared to be.
This is Daniel Bakala. He made this statement on January 6, 2021, when much of Tigray was still under communications blackout and media, human rights groups barred from entering Tigray. It would take a big heart to put a face that Daniel Bakala would reach in a finding that would contradict his initial point of view. After hundreds of women were gang raped, almost all clinics, hospitals, schools, factories and other properties destroyed, ethnic cleansing and hundreds of civilians murdered brutally, we should ask what degree of damage exactly was feared. Martin Plaut, a keen observer of Ethiopian politics, has also expressed his cynicism by likening the involvement of Daniel in the investigation to a student marking their own homework. The point here is crystal clear. If the findings of an investigation are to be accepted, it is very critical that the investigation has to be done by a body that all parties trust.
The Women's Association of Tigray released a statement denouncing the findings of the joint investigation by Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the United Nations on the gross violation of human rights in Tigray. The statement said that the findings do not reflect the situation on the ground and will therefore fail to bring justice for victims. The statement also stated concerns regarding the partiality of the state-appointed Ethiopian Human Rights Commission. The association also stated its disappointment that the investigation did not properly look into abuses committed on the women and children of Tigray, specifically the use of rape as a weapon of war, as well as the failure of investigators to look into massacres committed across different parts of Tigray, including the Aksum massacre, Mariam Dengalat, and Debra Abai. The statement also highlighted the impacts of the ongoing siege on Tigray, including the health and well-being of children, and mothers forced to go without medication, proper medical care, and food, as well as other essential public services. The statement called for an independent investigation to be held and all those responsible to be held accountable. On November 9th, 2020, the Amara militia and Fano vigilante group committed the Maikadra massacre in western Tigray. This would just be one of many crimes committed ahead of a large-scale ethnic cleansing campaign in western Tigray, displacing over 1 million Tigrayans. Our reporters had a brief stay with IDPs from western Tigray who say the denial of the crimes committed is as painful as the crime itself. Haile Gabru has more on this.
Tigray has experienced untold tragedies in the course of almost a year-long occupation by the Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea. Maikadra was one of the first massacres recorded, with hundreds presumed dead and injured. Gabrekilos Danyo and Mir Salom are just one of the many who lived out in Maikadra massacres. They are now sheltered in one of the IDP centers in Mekelle. Here is their testimony.
They first thought I was dead. They left me along the street of Maikadra. After a while, I saw some people walking by the street and I was able to call them. Almost all corners of Maikadra were full of Tigrayans' bodies who were severely killed by the barbaric Amhara forces. I have seen Amhara forces killing and attacking many people in Maikadra. I also saw them attacking Gabrekilos. They hit him on the back of his head with knives. He fell instantly. They put the knife on his body and stabbed him repeatedly to check if he was still alive. They did the same thing to me. I was unconscious, so I couldn't feel it. They covered my body because they thought I was dead.
Following the brutal Maikadra's massacre, Anko Bahrebelai, who has lost her beloved husband, and besides, Nugus Samara has also says he hasn't been able to find 7 of his family members since that time. He says everyone that was killed was Tigrayan.
The victims of the Maikadra massacre were Tigrayans. They were all day laborers. We have lost our brothers and sisters here.
The Maikadra's massacre is unspeakable. I didn't witness Amhara being killed or raped. I am 72 years old. I can give you my testimony. It was Amhara militia killing and raping Tigrayans.
Eyewitnesses that we have spoken to say that hundreds of innocent civilians had been slaughtered with axes and machetes and their bodies dumped into rivers. They have burned their bodies.
They used to burn the bodies of the victims when it starts to decay. Bodies would stay unburied for 3 to 4 days. Then they came wearing gloves and collected the bodies using tractors and dumped them into holes and rivers. Finally, we were told to collect their bones. There was a car assigned to collect the bodies of the victims at dawn. It was inhuman. Bodies were eaten by scavengers.
It's now been a year since Maikadra massacre. Hundreds of Tigrayans lost their lives in the hands of Amhara militia and Fano vigilante group. A year without justice and accountability.
On November 28, 2020, during the religiously significant holiday of Mariam Tzion, Eritrean troops would go on a killing rampage, killing innocent civilians on the streets, in churches, and in their homes. Not only that, but the Eritrean soldiers would later deny the families the right to bury their loved ones, leaving dead bodies on the streets of the ancient city for days. Aragawi Gabra Mikhail with the details.
Aksum's massacre was one of the most dreadful massacres that took place throughout Tigray. During this awful day of November 28, 2020, civilians were massacred by Eritrean troops. As it was made impossible to give the dead a proper burial by the perpetrators, most of the bodies were abandoned for days. Priest Klaimonot and Priest Mogus were among the ones who buried hundreds of bodies in mass graves in different churches, and they described the horrible incident as follows. All
the streets were full of bodies. The killings took place everywhere, on the fields, on the streets, and on the houses. There were also men who were eaten by scavengers.
Some people collected the bodies, carried them with carts and dropped them here in the churchyard. Then we, the priests who were inside the churches, buried them in mass graves. The graveyards were kept open for days, so we can add more bodies in them. When it is full, we dug another. That was how we buried them.
The massacre was so massive that a family has lost from 2 to 7 members. In addition, children, women, youths, religious fathers, and elders were among the victims. Survivors do tell horrific accounts.
The Eritrean troops came and shot me at the leg. Then I just fell on the ground like I was dead. There were 6 others who were killed in front of me. My son came to check me along with 2 of his friends, but the Eritrean troops killed 3 of them instantly. Their body was abandoned in the streets for 3 days, as no one was allowed to bury them. 2 people were killed while trying to pick up the bodies and bury them.
My husband, Brahane Gabir, my 27 and 30 years old sons, Mokkanem Brahane and Tsagai Brahane, were killed by the Eritrean troops after they dragged them out of their home for doing nothing.
Another witness who lost 3 of his family members and a neighbor also has the following to share.
The Eritrean troops didn't talk to them. They only killed 4 of them in raw, in the middle of their fields out of the blue. The 4th one was the son of my neighbor, Deacon Meskel. I couldn't pick up the bodies of my children, as they threatened to kill me if I tried to bury them. I was shocked and lost my consciousness. I lost the direction of my house and spent the night outside. I came back in the morning and the bodies were laid there. I cried for help and people came. We loaded the bodies on a cart and took them to the church for burial. But the Eritrean troops opened fire on the gathered people and killed 3 women. Then we dispersed, abandoning the bodies. Finally, we managed to bury them at the church of Arba'atu Insisa at around 5 p.m.
What is saddening is that the UN Human Rights Commission and the state-affiliated Ethiopian Human Rights Commission didn't cover the areas such as Aksum where grave atrocities and massacres took place. After all, any human rights abuses perpetrated in Tigray couldn't be investigated by Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, which is accountable to the Ethiopian House of People's Representatives, who declared the war on the people of Tigray.
That wraps up our news for the evening. Thank you for joining us and good night.